Michelle Lujan Grisham has had better weeks. Once the odds-on favorite for a post in the Biden cabinet as Secretary of Health and Human Services, the governor, who was co-chair of the president-elect's transition team, by the way, apparently fell out of favor. Why that happened, we can't be certain. There are reports she was offered a cabinet job at the Department of the Interior, which didn't seem to make much sense. And there are stories that somehow she was seen as trying to orchestrate her appointment to HHS. Now, here to make some sense of that and other notable political news is our Line Opinion panel. We welcome back to our virtual table this week former state senator, head of New Mexico Working Families Party, Eric Riego. Another former state senator and Line regular, Diane Snyder, is back. And former House Minority Whip and Line regular, Daniel Foley, returns. Dan, keep that fist down. I'm going to start with you. Let's start with that whole orchestration in quotes there thing. Part one, is it bad to say no to a job she didn't feel qualified for or want?
No, not at all. I think, look, it's, we were talking off the air about an exclusive club being in the U.S. Senate of 100 people. Mm-hmm. You're in a pretty exclusive club when you're a governor if there's only 50 of them. And, when you're, as we all know, and being a cabinet member is clearly and would be an unbelievable opportunity, but giving up a chance to run the state and be the executive of a state, I think unless I was given the opportunity to take the very specific cabinet position I wanted, I'd stay right at home and be the governor of a state. I just think there's more to do. There's more opportunity. You can make a bigger change. And more importantly, you're not carrying someone else's water. You're creating the water that other people are carrying. And that's kind of that to me, that's a big factor, especially for someone who's been on the legislative side, been on the, she was a congresswoman. She's been a secretary at the state level where she's had to carry out other people's plans. Right now, it's all her plans all the way. And I just, it would have to be a pretty choice opportunity for me to say I want to go from being the captain to being the first lieutenant. Mm-hmm.
Eric Riego, part two of that question. If she's advocating for a job she does want, is that orchestrating in your mind, or is that just how politics goes?
There's this really tricky balance between, showing interest, getting the word out, but demurring. It was a little bit like the vice presidential stakes. You have to do this dance in politics between, lining up support but not pushing too hard. Feigning, disinterest. And she was in the dance, but I think at some level, I don't think she just wanted, to Dan's point, I don't think she just wanted any job in the cabinet. She's 2 years into her governor's term. She's got, we got a lot going on here. She's the chief executive of a state. Granted, we're not a big state, but, she's still in charge of the executive branch of government, which is a pretty big deal. And, why leave that for a cabinet job that maybe, I'm sure she had she's got some background. She's worked a lot on environmental issues and conservation issues. So it wouldn't been, I think she would have been fine and competent at the Interior Department. But, her heart and her career has been around healthcare, right? She was the health secretary. It's been where she's, it's been to what she's passionate about. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, people forget there's a very finite number of cabinet positions and there are literally thousands of people who are in the running. So it's not like an election where anybody steps up and just runs. It's like you gotta line up a lot of ducks. You got to get a lot of people lined up. Mm-hmm. And these things go squirrely for any number of reasons that have nothing to do with competence or it's timing. It's a whole series of factors. So right. She'll be fine. I think Howie. I think the lieutenant governor is kind of bummed about it. He was, I think, looking forward to maybe getting his shot, but I'm sure he'll get his shot at some point. And a lot of folks are glad she's here. I know there's some folks maybe who aren't so glad that she didn't leave.
Right.
But she'll be around for a while, I think.
Mm-hmm. Senator Snyder, CNN and Politico and others say it's either Congresswoman Holland or Senator Udall for this interior position that's still being sort of kicked around. What's your sense of that? My question is, the meaning there is your sense of it for New Mexico. What does New Mexico get out of it if one of those folks does get an interior nod or they don't, actually? What's the upshot for us?
Well, if they don't, I think it's going to be some very unhappy people in New Mexico, because I mean, I wasn't a big supporter of either one of them, but they are New Mexicans and I want them to be successful. And so if they went out of state and went someplace else, I kind of feel the same way about the governor. How could, she's the most qualified person I know of all the ones they mentioned, and yet she wasn't chosen. The fact that other New Mexicans are being seriously considered, at least that's what we're hearing, for the Department of the Interior, to offer that job to her, and even more if she had taken it, how disruptive that might have become to the Democratic Party in New Mexico. And I think I think that would have been bad. The one person you left out that I think also has a serious chance at it is Senator Heinrich. And if Senator Heinrich was chosen, then Representative Congresswoman Holland would stay in place, and Tom Udall would ride off into the sunset with his other relatives. But the piece that people don't think about, or maybe they do and haven't mentioned it, is the fact if Senator Heinrich was appointed, then Governor Lujan would be the one appointing his replacement. And it's pretty much tradition, at least in most states I've seen, is the governor appoints themselves to become that senator. Then Howie does become the governor, and the lieutenant governor, I learned, gets appointed, but it has to have Senate approval, state Senate approval, before they can become the new lieutenant governor. So, and one of the things that a lot of people may not know is Governor Lujan has an elderly mother who is in care, and you know that's hard to go off and leave your parent. So I think all of those played into her decision, and I'm with her. If it wasn't the job I really wanted, then I've got a great one. I wouldn't be leaving it to go and just be a cabinet secretary.
Sure. Dan Foley, let's kind of what if here for just a little bit, and going back to Congresswoman Holland, if she in fact got the nod and she accepted it, the dominoes falling over in the district would be very interesting. I have to ask straight up, would that be an opportunity for Mark Ronchetti?
You know, that seat since Heather Wilson left has been getting, it's been getting more and more, Eric Grego's done a very good job of turning that seat more and more towards him. So, I'm not sure that there would be an opportunity for a Republican to win that seat. It would be a special election. So that means the next election that rolls up, there'd be a House seat. There'd be a House seat up. So the question is, with the legislature, with all the other stuff going on, do the Democrats lose interest? And more importantly, who their candidate is, right? I mean, if you have a seat like that, if Deb Haaland takes that job, we could probably sit here and in 30 seconds come up with 10 names that are going to throw their name in there. Yep. And I don't think you could come up with 10 Republicans that are going to throw their name in there. You might get 2. And so, you're going to wind up having an unbelievable battle to just get, the Democrat nominee out of there, even though it's not going to be done, in a primary battle. It's still going to there's going to be a lot of bloodletting to get that representative. But I don't think the Republicans have a chance. I don't think Deb Haaland's going to get the job. Right. I think it's going to go to Tom Udall. It's the easiest transition, right? He's already announced his retirement. You got people running for the seat. I mean, it just seems, and he fits a long line of Udalls that have been Department of Interior folks. So, I mean, I would see him doing it. It'd be interesting to see a New Mexican be the first Native American to get that position. Sure. That would be an interesting kudos. That would be something that would be in the record books for New Mexico. Let
me hustle a couple of other things here real quick. I want to get to Steve Pearce being elected to another term as party chair. Eric, let me start with you. Most of the other top choices, pretty conservative, Trump-supporting names. What did it for him? There's been so much controversy around Steve Pearce over this past tenure, but he's back in.
Yeah, I was surprised, honestly, because I do have a few Republican friends, including Dan, who were not huge fans of Steve Pearce. And given the outcome of the election, I mean, I guess you could claim, picking up that congressional seat down south was a win. But they lost a seat in the Senate. They narrowly picked up a seat in the House, but overall, the body, both the House and the Senate, moved in a much more, I think, progressive direction, according to if you believe, sort of what people are saying, and which I do. CD1, it was trounced. I mean, if there was any opportunity to like move that and make that even a close race. They got, you know, Deb Haaland, who frankly has been a pretty liberal, progressive, pro-conservation congressional member. You know, you would think that if there was any swinginess to CD1, that would have gone in a more Republican direction. So
Eric,
I feel
do me a favor. I need to swing in the other two here real quick. I want to get their opinion on this situation. We're just getting a little crunchy on time. Senator Snyder, your sense of the Steve Pearce re-election in his future, another run for governor in there, or how do you see this all working out?
I don't know anything specifically, but that would be the most logical step to me if that was what he was doing. I will say that many of the candidates that I've talked to, they got more help this year from the party than they than we got many years ago. And so the campaign they put together with Steve McKee and his folks of the Respect New Mexico was a great beginning. Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that I wanted to have a call to action in that campaign. And I didn't feel like we got that, which is very, very important, because you saw the Democratic Party going out and doing that call to action, registering people to vote, getting them out.
Let me do this. We're going to pick up some of that stuff in another segment here, a little quick. But Dan, real quick, 20 seconds if you can on Steve Pearce. How deep is the party's bench? And you know,
well, there's no party bench. I mean, you asked Eric how he won the election. Well, when you hold the election offline and you count the votes in a back room, you can always win an election. We've seen that work in every third world country in America. I disagree with Senator Snyder. I think that, you know, we have a guy who ran at the top of the ticket for the U.S. Senate, actually came pretty respectable in a race against Ben Ray Lujan, who's a very well-known name. Zero help from the state party. No help from the state party. The state party has turned into a group of, if you're not on the in crowd, if you're not one of the cool kids, you're not part of it. They're doing nothing to build the bench. They're doing nothing to bring people to the party. At a time when Republicans were winning congressional seats across the country, clearly the one thing we learned this last election cycle, they don't like President Trump, but the Republican message is not a bad message right now, except in New Mexico. And I think, you know, if you're going to do that, if Steve Pearce ran for party chair so that he could run for governor, I would tell you this: if he makes it through the primary for whatever seat he's running for, it's an automatic victory for a Democrat candidate.
We're out of time. We'll have to leave that there. We're back talking COVID in a few minutes. Up next, we talk to Congresswoman Deb Haaland.